Good morning, everybody. As Ian has said, we've been discussing the Scottish deposit return scheme for some considerable time now. And we are very much leading the way across the UK with our plans. And 2 weeks ago, I outlined those plans in detail to the Scottish Parliament. In doing so, I think I was struck by the strong consensus in Parliament and amongst much of the wider public. And I can't tell you how much easier it makes my life when I go to Parliament and effectively deliver a statement at which all the political parties are in agreement. That's an unusual scenario, and one I want to cherish for as long as the agreement lasts, and I can't imagine there won't be the occasional hiccup along the road with this. But it is there, that consensus is there. There are, of course, areas where further assurance is required and detail is still to be developed, and I am absolutely committed to working collaboratively on this. But overall, there does seem to be general agreement that a well-designed deposit return scheme will help to improve the environment and change people's attitudes to recycling and littering. Well, DRS is a very tangible example of the steps we're going to have to take to build a more circular economy, which then makes best use of our resources and, crucially, in doing so, protects our environment. So those sentiments were also a very strong feature of the extensive public consultation on DRS, which ran from June to September last year. And I'd like to thank those in the room who participated in that exercise. I'm also aware that for many of you, your engagement with the work around DRS has continued in the time since the consultation closed, and for many of you, probably well predated that consultation into the bargain. Your input into the proposals that we have now announced is appreciated. I believe that those proposals deliver the right blend, building on international best practice to deliver a scheme which is fit for the future and reflective of our particular needs here in Scotland. The detail of the proposals is set out in our Stage 1 full business case, which we published on 8th of May, and which many of you, I'm sure, will already have considered in exquisite detail. We will build on that business case in the months to come, refining our plans for the detailed operation of the scheme. That's I think we call it phase 1, but rather suggests there will be a phase 2. You have been warned. To summarise, we intend to implement a system covering metal cans, PET, which of course, as most of you know, is the most common form of plastic drinks containers, and glass. And that means up to 1.7 billion containers will be flowing through the scheme each year. And just think about that. That's just Scotland, 1.7 billion containers. Now, I know that there are strongly held views about my decision to include glass. I have looked carefully at the arguments. I'm sympathetic to the fact that glass increases the cost and complexity of the scheme. However, there are also significant benefits. We expect its inclusion will drive up recycling rates, help to address our litter problem, and reduce carbon emissions. And the strong public support for the inclusion of glass was also a significant factor in my decision. With regards to the challenges associated with its inclusion, I don't want to underplay their significance, and I don't want you to think that I don't understand that. I do. At the same time, I do take confidence from the fact that other schemes across Europe have successfully incorporated glass. We've got to learn from their experience and work together to implement our scheme in a way which helps business and the public make a success of DRS. Now, I do appreciate that some partners would prefer to have let the scheme bed in for a bit before making a decision on glass in the future. The experience elsewhere, however, suggests that that simply isn't an option given the different infrastructure requirements for this material. So the decision I was faced with was therefore to include glass now or accept that it wasn't going to be included at all. So I did not want to let the opportunity pass us by. I've chosen not to include HDPE plastic, which is the plastic primarily used to package fresh milk, and we've chosen not to include that at the scheme's outset. There has been some suggestion that this decision will penalise those businesses who sell milk in glass bottles. It's important to bear in mind that our proposals are focused on single-use throwaway containers. We accept that different arrangements should apply for those businesses using return for reuse packaging, such as returnable milk bottles. Unlike glass, it would be possible to include HDPE at a later stage with minimal adjustments to the scheme. A similar approach is also possible for cartons, should the evidence support such a move, and if we could sort out those more minor technical issues around things like contamination and odour, etc. Under our plans, all businesses who sell drinks in PET, metal or glass containers will be required to accept returns. This arrangement works well in other countries and is the most effective way of ensuring fair access to the scheme. It's important that every member of society is able to participate, and it must be as easy for people to return containers as it is for them to purchase their drink in the first place. We will, of course, need to be flexible in regard to the needs of those businesses acting as return points, and we are looking to deliver that flexibility in a number of ways. Businesses such as pubs and restaurants who sell drinks for consumption on site will be given the choice as to whether to pass a deposit on to the consumer. Businesses will also be given flexibility in how they enable returns through different sizes of reverse vending machines or manual over-the-counter take-back arrangements. We will explore with retailers how the financing of reverse vending machines can be supported, and we're committed to trialling different return, storage and collection solutions in preparation for the scheme's rollout. And that preparatory work will be taken forward through our Implementation Advisory Group, which I will come on to shortly. There have been calls by some to introduce automatic exemptions for retailers below a certain size. As I said in my statement to Parliament, modelling shows that even a modest level of automatic exemption would very quickly hinder the scheme's accessibility. An exemption for retailers with a floor space of up to 280 metres square, suggested by a number of partners, would result in only 17% of retailers accepting returns. And that would not meet the expectations of the public or deliver the accessibility which will be critical to the scheme's success, and certainly would not allow us to develop that automatic psychology and understanding about deposit and return. Of course, where there are numerous retailers operating really closely together, there may be scope to afford exemptions. I'm keen that we build this into the scheme's design, and we want to work with retailers to develop the correct solutions where such situations arise. I also believe there should be the flexibility to supplement the role of retailers through the operation of additional return points. And this could help to drive footfall for local initiatives and support, in particular, those communities which are less well served by shops. Turning to the value of the deposit, we are mindful of the need to ensure this is set at a level which provides the right incentive for the public to participate. The consultation indicated strong support for a deposit of 15 pence or more, and our analysis suggests that a deposit of around this level would support a strong return rate. Our planned deposit level of 20 pence reflects this and also accounts for future inflationary increases. I know that some have called for the setting of the deposit to be left to industry. I would have reservations about doing that. The Scottish Parliament is going to want to fully understand and exercise a degree of control over the financial impact that DRS is going to have on consumers across the country. While Government and Parliament will rightly set the framework within which DRS is to operate, I do agree that the people best placed to manage the service on the day-to-day basis sit within industry. Having looked at successful DRS examples elsewhere, there is strong evidence that privately operated systems can deliver high return rates and do so in a way which maximises efficiency. And in practice, this involves producers and retailers establishing a not-for-profit company for the specific purpose of running the scheme. They will bring expertise in business administration, finance and operations, and some will also carry direct experience through their participation in similar schemes elsewhere. Our decision on scheme ownership is also based to a degree on a point of principle. DRS is a form of producer responsibility, and so intuitively it makes sense that industry shoulders the responsibility for its operation. We will, of course, need to have the right checks and balances in place, but I have every confidence that this model can work well for us here in Scotland. It's on this basis that I'm proposing ambitious targets for the scheme, which I believe should be capturing upwards of 90% of our drinks containers. Now, it has to be said that despite significant effort and investment being directed into our curbside collection arrangements, our current capture rate for these containers falls well short of that ambition. There is clear evidence that DRS can deliver such results. Of course, that's not to say our curbside collections will no longer form part of the solution. They are and will remain critical if we are to deliver wider improvements in recycling performance. And I believe these services should be directly supported by industry through reformed packaging producer responsibility arrangements. Our consultation on those reforms closed last week, and Scottish Government officials are working closely with their counterparts elsewhere in the UK. It was a UK-wide consultation to agree next steps with that work. So looking ahead, to my mind, there are two key strands of activity that will be critical to the successful establishment of DRS here in Scotland. First, it will be essential for us to implement the right regulatory framework. The secondary legislation we bring forward will need to strike a balance, delivering those checks and balances which I touched on earlier, whilst also allowing industry to deliver the scheme in an efficient and effective way. The regulations to be introduced later this year will be subject to the Parliament's super affirmative procedure and will therefore provide another opportunity for all those with an interest to review and comment on our proposals. And I would encourage you to do so. Look out for the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform Committee. When those regulations are lodged, they will probably want to begin to take evidence themselves. So look out for that process when it starts. The second strand concerns detailed implementation, planning and delivery. We're under no illusions. Delivering a scheme as ambitious as this one will take extensive planning and preparation, and the contribution of industry will be central to our success. And that's why we've set up the Implementation Advisory Group to work with those sectors with a direct stake in the scheme's operation. The group, whose membership includes the British Soft Drinks Association, Scottish Retail Consortium, Scottish Grocers Federation, the Scottish Beer and Pub Association and others, met for the second time yesterday. And I know that Jill Farrell will update stakeholders on the detail of our plans later on today. I would simply encourage all those who feel they have something to offer to that process to continue the strong engagement which Government and Zero Waste Scotland have benefited from up to this point. And that engagement will help to inform our thinking about the critical path to a fully operational scheme. I'd like to deliver the scheme in the current parliamentary term. I accept that this is ambitious and that many in industry would prefer us to defer our plans in the expectation that others elsewhere in the UK are likely to commit to a DRS in the near future. I'm not convinced. The UK, unlike Scotland, will need primary legislation, and after that, regulations to implement a scheme, which will inevitably take an extended period, with or without all the other issues that are currently and for the foreseeable future going to be dominating the Westminster agenda. So that uncertainty and the need to make progress on improving recycling and resource use mean that I want to move ahead as swiftly as possible in Scotland. At the same time, I'm optimistic that the approach that we are taking here in Scotland will itself provide a blueprint for future action across the UK, and I'm very open to exploring opportunities for collaboration on DRS. And in fact, over the last year or so, I've had two ministerial meetings with counterparts at Westminster and in Cardiff. So they have known the trajectory that we are on, but they also know that we are open to having those continued conversations. To conclude, I believe the approach we are taking in this area is absolutely the right one, and I look forward to working with you all in the months to come as we seek to turn our ambitious proposals into a fully operational scheme which benefits communities across Scotland. I look forward to your reflections on what you've heard this morning. And I just would add one little thing. I don't know if Trolls is here from Tomra. He is here. Some of you were at the event in Parliament last night. I can recognise some faces from that event. Trolls used a comment which I thought was actually one that I personally intend to steal from him and use frequently whenever I'm talking about this. And it's really about that change in the mindset, because that's what this is going to be about. This is going to be about changing the way people view the containers within which they get the product. Trolls talked about borrowing the bottle. And I thought, bingo. We're buying the product, but we're only borrowing the bottle. And I think that's where we need people's psychology to be, that understanding. So if you start hearing that from me frequently, you can thank Trolls because he's the one that flagged it up last night. But I think that really helps us begin to understand what we're actually doing here. So in the meantime, I'd like to thank you once again for participating, and I hope you find the rest of today's event helpful.